What's happening, y'all? Welcome inside the Fantasy Stock Exchange. Danny and Bush coming at you with our way too early top 12 running backs. Basically, we are kind of running out of ideas around here. So if you have any ideas for us, leave them in the comments below. While you're down there, make sure you hit the like button, subscribe to the channel if you're new. But we are going through our top 12 running backs for 2021 fantasy football. So next year's fantasy football. These are kind of our initial reaction right after the season. We're kind of looking ahead to see where we might want to pick these running backs, because there's a lot of great running back talent for fantasy football next year. Of course, some of them are going to get injured or something in the offseason, but nonetheless, this should be a fun exercise. So we'll hope you guys enjoy this. On Friday, we'll actually have the wide receiver version of this. We're not going to do quarterbacks and tight ends, just running backs and wide receivers, but we hope you guys enjoy that as well. Danny, how you doing?
Doing well. And as the viewers can see, I got a nice little new spot ready to record with you guys. Yeah, I finally got my webcam back from Guelph, so I set up in the PC room. Should be nice, fluid.
No potato cam.
No potato cam. Got to work on the lighting next, because as you can see, it's kind of dark in this room. But aside from that, hope you guys enjoy the quality.
Yep. All right, so we're going to hit the intro, and then we're going to get into the first running back on our list. Okay, so as I mentioned, top 12 running backs for fantasy football in 2021. We're going to talk about some honorable mentions at the end, maybe guys who are in the same tier as like our RB12 or whatever. But our first running back, maybe this comes as a surprise to some people, but it's Christian McCaffrey. Christian McCaffrey is our first running back. Danny, you can get into Christian McCaffrey and why he deserves to be the first running back.
Okay, guys, do not overthink this. The RB1, the generational running back of fantasy football. Heck, generational player of fantasy football is Christian McCaffrey. I mean, yes, I get that. You might have a sour taste if you had the first overall pick last year, picked him, and he only played three games this year. But he was the same Christian McCaffrey as he was from 2019, as he was from 2018, when he compiled the second most points ever recorded in fantasy football, only trailing LaDainian Tomlinson, who did it on the back of 28 touchdowns. McCaffrey is a freak generational talent. Again, let's not forget that this guy put up over 400 points in 2019. And yet, in the year that he set the second most points ever, he averaged 25.8 half PPR points per game. Last year in the 3 games he played, did he fall off? No, he just went on to average 27.3 points per game. So, I mean, as we mentioned in the way too early mock draft, I mean, there's no other player in fantasy football that combines the safe volume floor that he's getting. I mean, this guy's guaranteed 20, 25 touches per game with the ridiculously high game-to-game ceiling that this guy can, on any given game, win you a week. I mean, we're talking a guy who led the running back position with 116 receptions and 1,005 receiving yards, both records of all time, and also had 287 rushing attempts and over 1,350 rushing yards, which ranked 4th and 3rd, respectively, at the running back position in 2019. I mean, this guy's a freak, generational fantasy asset. He get the best of both worlds with him, get the high rushing output and the league record receiving output that he gives you. I mean, there's a no-brainer. And then you couple that with the fact that the guy had 19 touchdowns to go along with that in 2019, and he had 6 in 3 games just last year. I just see no way McCaffrey's going to fall off given what he's been able to show and put on the field these last 3 years. So if you have the 101, don't be scared. Take McCaffrey, lock and loaded.
Yeah, and this is a guy that is game script proof, is coach proof, is quarterback proof. Like, we saw him do this in 2019 with Kyle Allen. We saw him do this in 2019 with Will Grier for a couple of games, I believe, too. And last year, the Carolina Panthers scored the 24th most points in the league. And as we mentioned, Christian McCaffrey was the RB1 in terms of points per game in the 3 games that he played. And I saw Mike Tagliere tweet out a stat where it was like Christian McCaffrey had more 24-point performances last year than like every running back in fantasy except for like 4 guys. So, and he played 3 games last year. So this is a dude that if he is in your lineup, if he is on the field, and that's a risk for every running back, not just Christian McCaffrey. And Christian McCaffrey throughout his career has not shown to be a guy that gets injured very easily. He was a guy that played like literally 100% of the snaps most of the time and was still not getting injured. So he was kind of bound to get injured at some point. I don't think this is going to be a trend of his. I have no questions about it. If I have the 101, I'm picking Christian McCaffrey in any format.
like even from his college days, people want to say, oh, maybe he's injury prone because he missed 13 games last year. Even in his college games, he was quite literally playing like 98% of the offensive snaps. And
yeah, he was literally Stanford's offense.
It's crazy. And special teams. Like this guy was returning kicks and punts for them, for Christ's sake. I mean, what he is able to do on the football field is unmatched by any other running back in the league, given the total volume and the total efficiency he's able to provide. So I fully agree. Again, McCaffrey's the lock and loaded 101. And if you don't take him there next year, I'm actually going to question you. Like anybody watching
and we're going to talk about some guys in the next like couple picks here, or a couple rankings here that you potentially, I guess, could pick over Christian McCaffrey. But to me, they have more concerns, all of them, than Christian McCaffrey. Because McCaffrey's only concern to me is, does he get injured? Because the offense was bad in 2019 and he still produced. The offense was bad last year and he still produced. If anything, I think his ceiling is even higher next year because if Teddy Bridgewater is still the quarterback there, then he's the second year in the system for Matt Rule and Joe Brady. I know Joe Brady's potentially a hot coaching candidate, but I'm fairly certain they're going to run the same system regardless if Joe Brady is there or not, because I don't think he's taking his entire staff from Carolina, Joe Brady, and all that kind of stuff. But either way, Christian McCaffrey to me is locked and loaded 101. I think if anyone overthinks it, just take advantage of it. If you are the 103 in your draft and Dalvin Cook and Alvin Kamara go off the board before Christian McCaffrey, just thank your lucky stars that your opponents potentially drafted Christian McCaffrey the year before and got stung by it. So, yeah, we shouldn't spend too much more time on him. He's pretty much a no-brainer. Dalvin Cook, another kind of no-brainer at the top of the draft. Currently, we have him at number 2. This may change. And the reason I say that is because the big concern for Dalvin Cook last year was his contract situation going into the season and his health, because previously he had been a guy who wasn't able to finish seasons, but everyone knew if he could string together and like 16 games or 14, 15 games, that he had the potential to finish as the RB1. Well, that's exactly what he did last year. He finished as the RB1. The lingering concern of health for Dalvin Cook is definitely still there. It's not going away. This is still a guy that's torn his ACL before, and he's had a couple nagging hamstring injuries, but we actually saw him play through a number of things this year, which was encouraging to see. There was times where it looked like he got injured, and then he would come back into games and still produce after that. So that is a good thing. He missed one game this year, I believe, is all he missed. And that was definitely encouraging to see. But the other thing that is a little concerning of why he's behind Christian McCaffrey for me is Kubiak is potentially retiring. So Gary Kubiak, the Vikings offensive coordinator, is very famous for having the Kubiak run scheme, the Shanahan run scheme that everyone runs around the NFL, like the Browns and the Niners and the Rams and all that kind of stuff. So if Gary Kubiak retires, that is a little bit concerning for Dalvin Cook, considering how well he is how well he has played in this scheme. This scheme is tailor-made for Dalvin Cook, and you can see the results in the fantasy scores if you have Dalvin Cook. So if Alvin Kamara, I'm going to say this right now, just spoiler alert, he's our number 3 running back. If Alvin Kamara has any other quarterback other than Taysom Hill, I will move him ahead of Dalvin Cook. That's basically the way I'm looking at it. But again, this is a guy that is averaging 23 points per game when on the field. And when he's on the field also, he's averaging 20 carries, 4 targets, and more than a touchdown per game. So Dalvin Cook is that offense. When they get in the red zone, when they're looking for checkdowns, like everything about that offense is Dalvin Cook, no matter how good Justin Jefferson is or how good Adam Thielen is. So Dalvin Cook is a locked and loaded top 3 running back, and the 2-3 is the only thing that's really going to change for me, depending on Alvin Kamara.
100%. Again, when you're talking about Dalvin Cook, this is a guy who had over 1,900 total yards from scrimmage and only 14 games played and 17 touchdowns total. I mean, he's a freak when on the field. Again, you mentioned the concerns with Kubiak leaving could be relevant as well. But
I don't think it changes too much. It's just enough of a concern to knock him down for someone like Kamara. Definitely. If Kamara has Breeze back or something like that.
And definitely. I mean, and we've seen it this year. A lot of the people that ended up getting Dalvin at the extreme discount that he was going, again, with all those concerns going into the year, he was falling to the mid.
I think he went into 109 in my league, and I passed on him for Clyde Edwards-Helaire, and I still somehow won the championship. So
yeah, that's been. I mean, again, a lot of those people, we talked about your tweet of like championship winning type players, like a lot of those people who took Dalvin Cook were at the minimum in their semifinals because of that value. I mean, this guy led teams all throughout the year. He turned it on. Like in the mid part of the year, I don't think, quite frankly, there was any other asset in fantasy football that was close to him. Like this guy was competitive.
Schedule for a lot of that part too. Like he played the Bears twice. He had a couple other good defenses that he played against. Yeah. And I don't think you're going to be as unlucky next year as you were this year if you had Dalvin Cook, because his playoff schedule was just brutal this year. Yeah. I don't think that happens again. I just by straight chance, I just don't think it happens again. Yeah, just by dumb luck. He just had a horrible schedule for the finals. So if you add Dalvin Cook, there's a chance you didn't win your championship because of that. But he still performed pretty well, even despite those tough matchups.
Yeah, for sure. And again, you mentioned the name that we were kind of contending with Dalvin Cook. The only real concern why he's under Dalvin Cook is because of the uncertainty of Breeze and the possibility that Taysom Hill's a quarterback. And that's going to be running back Alvin Kamara of these New Orleans Saints. Sorry, muffled my words. Again, 2 through 4, I find in these rankings, again, we're going to mention the fourth name as well, is really kind of hard to dictate, and they're fluid. But again, if Breeze is back or they have another immobile, if like a Mac Jones lands there, Alvin Kamara is going to be my 1. Or the 2, sorry, after McCaffrey, my bad. The reason being why
is the quarterback.
The reason why he's going to be ahead of the Cook and the Henry for me is what we look for in any type of PPR format, half PPR, full PPR. Who can give me a ton of receptions and who can give me a ton of touchdowns? Well, guess what? Through 15 games, only in 15 games last year, Alvin Kamara paced the position in receptions with 83. He had the second most targets amongst the position behind J.D. McKissick with 107. And he had 21 total touchdowns in 15 games played. I mean, this guy
is J.D. McKissick led running backs in targets?
Targets, yes.
Wow, that's wild.
And it's crazy to me that a lot of people are, even if, like, hypothetically say Taysom Hill's back, like, he's still going to be my 3 because
he'll probably fall to like 108 if that happens.
And that's what I'm saying. A lot of people are saying, oh, he's going to be my 6 or 7 at that point. I'm like, are you kidding me? This guy has proven time and time again that he is an elite running back. The most concern that I honestly have if Taysom Hill is the quarterback is simply the rushing volume on the goal line. Because even
that is my concern with him. Because when Alvin Kamara was banged up this year and Taysom Hill was taking over as the quarterback because Breeze was out, a lot of people were like, well, Taysom Hill's not throwing to Alvin Kamara. It's like, no, Alvin Kamara wasn't on the field because Alvin Kamara wasn't healthy. Once Alvin Kamara was healthy, you saw that target total go back up. Sean Payton isn't stupid. He knows that this offense is better when Alvin Kamara gets targets. So whether Taysom Hill's the quarterback or not, and I tend to think that's probably what's going to happen if Drew Brees retires, it's probably going to be Taysom Hill as the quarterback. I'm not sure how well that's going to go for the New Orleans Saints, but I think that is what is going to happen. Whether he's the quarterback or not, this is still a bona fide top 5 pick for me in fantasy drafts. And he'll be the RB2 in my opinion, and the 102 if Drew Brees is back for whatever reason.
I'll just continue it with this. You mentioned Dalvin was the RB1. He was actually the RB1 in half PPR points per game. He had 22.6 half PPR points per game. Obviously, excluding McCaffrey, 3 games sample isn't enough. Kamara was the RB1 actually in half PPR. Now he averaged a fraction less points per game at 22.4. But that just goes to show you, I mean, these guys are neck and neck regardless.
Yeah, and we have one that's capable of scoring like 60 points.
Yeah, and if you're looking at it from Kamara's standpoint, like, yes, Drew Brees may potentially not be back. We took it into effect in our rankings. But if they drop like a Mac Jones in the first round, he's going to go to 2. Because Mac Jones, we've seen the way he's utilized Najee Harris into college, the way he's not the most mobile, but he's a smart, accurate quarterback. He can fit that Saints system perfectly. And if he lands there, Alvin Kamara is my clear 102. And although as good as Dalvin Cook it is, like, Alvin Kamara is a guy. So we'll go into number 4, and it's another guy who's an absolute stud this year, an absolute beast himself. But he doesn't necessarily do it a similar way of Christian McCaffrey and Kamara. He does it on the ground game. Take it away with Derrick Henry.
Yeah, Derrick Henry. The thing with Derrick Henry and why he's 4th, because you could, I'm sure you people are going to make the argument that he should be the 102 or the 101 even. Like, I could see people making that argument. But the problem with Derrick Henry is the pass catching work, right? And that's not going to stop me from drafting him. I know people will say like, oh, he's a bust for fantasy because he doesn't catch passes. Like, no, he's still a great fantasy asset, but that does put him behind guys like Alvin Kamara and like Dalvin Cook and CMC who get just pretty similar volume to him on the ground, but they also get receiving work and they also get the goal line work that Derrick Henry gets. Speaking of goal line work, Derrick Henry is another guy like Dalvin Cook that I mentioned, has about 24 touches per game, 22 or so of those being carries, and then averages more than a touchdown per game as well. So Derrick Henry is that offense. Everyone knows that. If Arthur Smith leaves, if he gets a head coaching job, I'm really not all that concerned, to be honest. I think Derrick Henry is the least. I think he's the least affected by that. I think the more affected people by that type of change are Corey Davis and AJ Brown and Ryan Tannehill. I think Derrick Henry is the one guy that isn't really affected all that much if Arthur Smith goes anywhere. So Derrick Henry, to me, this is the end of the top tier of running backs. These are the top 4 guys. maybe 2, 3, and 4 are more interchangeable. Maybe even 1 is interchangeable if you don't think it's McCaffrey. But I think these are the clear top 4 guys if you have a top 4 pick next year. And I think top 4 pick is probably where you're going to want to pick next year.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. And talking about Derrick Henry again, yes, if Arthur Smith leaves, a lot of people might make it a concern. But Mike Vrabel's still there. And Mike Vrabel has grown up, played in the NFL with a ground and pound physical standpoint of football. Like he was a linebacker for the past, played some tight ends.
He had some physical running backs he had to practice against too.
Yeah, like he's a big physical guy. He played against big physical guys. You can tell when this guy takes on interviews, when he talks about the Titans' identity on offense, he wants to make sure that they physically impose their will. And if Arthur Smith leaves, doesn't change the fact that Mike Vrabel is going to run his 6'3", 250-pound stallion to the ground. So even if Arthur Smith leaves, I mean, we mentioned the play caller for Dalvin Cook and the quarterback situation for Alvin Kamara. Even if Arthur Smith leaves, I'm not worried about Henry's value. So fully agree. He's my number 4 as well. We both have him there. Now, the rest of the list is actually where it's going to kind of change up because after the top 4, I mean, these rankings can go a multitude of ways. But for our consensus, we currently have it as Saquon Barkley as our 5. So you want to take it away with our boy Saquon Barkley, my division rival.
Yeah, so this is a tier gap, right? As I mentioned, this is a tier gap in our rankings where we have the top 4 guys in one tier and then these next couple of guys that we have in this tier. So Saquon Barkley is who I currently have at 5. And there's a bit of projection, obviously, that involves Saquon Barkley because we all know about his physical talent, right? He's probably the most physically talented running back since Adrian Peterson. There's the volume also that he gets. He gets a workload that is unlike anyone outside the top 4 guys that we already talked about. He gets 21 opportunities per game, basically over the last 2 years that he's been in New York with Daniel Jones as the starting quarterback. And I know it's a 1-game sample size this season that he played the full game, but with Jason Garrett calling the plays, you saw, and as a Dallas Cowboys fan, with Jason Garrett, he does like to feed a workhorse running back, and he absolutely did that. The one game that we saw Saquon Barkley with Jason Garrett, where he saw 24 opportunities, 9 of them being targets. So the ACL is concerning, right? It's a little concerning, but it was early in the season, and this is a freak physical specimen who probably has wolf's blood. I'm not concerned with Saquon Barkley unless I hear otherwise. The fantasy doctors around the industry, if you guys don't already follow some on Twitter, I advise you do so. I imagine they're probably not going to be overly concerned about Saquon Barkley's ACL tear. They're probably going to be like, yeah, draft him in the top 5. He's not a concern. It happened early in the season. He's a peak physical specimen who can get back on the field, assuming there's no complications. All that kind of stuff is going to lead me to believe that Saquon is going to be just fine coming off of an ACL tear. And again, I mentioned there's some projection in this. This is me. The reason I'm saying I can pick him at 5 here is because this is me projecting an improvement in the offense as of right now over the offseason. I think they're going to add receivers, O-line, second year in the scheme. There's a second year in the scheme involved with Daniel Jones, which could make the offense better. Again, we are talking about an offense that has only where to go. The only way is up. They finished 31st in points for this season. The only team that was worse than the New York Jets. And Saquon alone being on the team will make them a better offense. So I think this is a guy, even if the Giants score 20th in the league in points for, which I think is about a reasonable projection if they add a Devontae Smith in the draft or if they add a Chris Godwin in free agency or something like that. And maybe they add another offensive line piece. They're going to get Nate Solder back, who opted out before the season. So that alone is an offensive line upgrade, along with Andrew Thomas being in his second year. And again, second year in the scheme usually balances itself out for everyone, including the offensive line. So this is a projection pick. It's obviously riskier than maybe some of the other guys we're going to talk about in a minute, but I think the ceiling is worth it for Saquon Barkley. He's my 105.
Yeah, and I fully agree. Again, I currently have him as a 6 behind the next guy I'm going to be talking about. But when you're mentioning Saquon Barkley, the peak physical talent, I mean, we were mentioning guys earlier on that give you both the rushing and receiving output. I mean, this is a guy in his rookie season who absolutely exploded for, what was it, 85 receptions?
Yeah, he had like 2,000 total yards and a number of fantasy week-winning type of plays. That's what Saquon gives you, right? He gives you those 80-yard touchdowns. And not only that, but he gives you them in style, right? He's a guy that you just love watching on your fantasy team because a big part of playing fantasy football is having fun watching your players. And a guy like A.J. Brown this year, who I just had a tremendous amount of fun watching on my fantasy team, is what Saquon Barkley also gives you, is because he's just breaking people off, shrugging them off like they're nothing en route to a 70-yard touchdown. This is what Saquon Barkley does.
For sure. And I will tell you again, although I have him at my 6 right now, if he didn't have the knee concern, like if we're going into the season and all the doctors are saying, you know what, this guy's fully healthy, I could fathom even having him up to like 4. If you want to make the argument that he has.
If you wanted to make the argument over Derrick Henry because of the receiving volume, I don't hate it.
Yeah, I agree. So
maybe
I fully agree there.
Who Brees isn't back.
Yeah, no, I agree. So fully agree. Saquon Barkley is my 6 right now because of the health concerns. The guy that I currently have at my 5 and our consensus 6 is actually going to be none other than the Colts rookie running back Jonathan Taylor. I mean, wow, did this kid work his way up throughout the season? I mean, this guy looked like a bust earlier on. I mean, you spent a 3rd-round pick on him. You really weren't happy with the output. He looked like Trent Richardson out there. He wasn't breaking tackles. He wasn't finding the hole. And then it all just flipped, and he turned into Nick Chubb. And it's crazy when you think about it. I mean, this guy was the RB8 and half PPR points per game for running backs that play 12-plus games, despite feeling like a disappointment at some point this year.
10 to 12 weeks, too.
Quite literally. The midpoint of this year, he wasn't getting the volume. We weren't really happy with what he was doing. But let me tell you, his last 5 weeks, if you made your fantasy football playoffs, if you were trying to clinch your spot, he could have won you championships. I mean, 23.16 half PPR points.
Won me a championship in our listener league.
23.16 half PPR points per game. If you extrapolate that across a 16-game full season sample size, would have equated to the RB1 this year if you exclude guys like Antonio Williams, who played 1 game, or Christian McCaffrey, who played 3. So, I mean, despite his early struggles, this is still a guy who had 1,468 yards from scrimmage and 12 total touchdowns, despite being inconsistent in his overall workload on a game-to-game basis. So, and if you're wondering specifically, again, that sample size that I didn't include the playoff game, if you want to include that as well, he also had 23 touches, 84 yards, and a touchdown in that game. So, Jonathan Taylor is a freak athlete. It is behind one of the best situations in the entire NFL. I mean, the Colts offensive line is just absolute maulers. We'll see the status. Again, Anthony Costanzo retired today, so we'll see how they address the left tackle position in free agency or in the draft. But regardless, this guy is a physical specimen playing behind a physical run-first offensive line. I mean, the reason why he's even ahead of the guy I said, Nick Chubb, is because of the reception upside. This guy had 35 receptions in the 14 games he played. I mean, full season next year, if this guy is a consistent 40, 45 reception running back, he's going to be a perennial top 5, top 6 type guy. It's just going to happen because that's how talented he is as a pure runner.
Yep, and you mentioned the tiebreaker being the receptions for Jonathan Taylor. We can probably just transition into Nick Chubb as the next guy that we have up here. I actually do have Nick Chubb. This is our consensus rankings that we're talking about. I actually have Nick Chubb ahead of Jonathan Taylor. And the reason I have him ahead, you mentioned the reception tiebreaker for Jonathan Taylor. I actually think that the reception tiebreaker is less important than the quarterback tiebreaker that I have for Nick Chubb and the offensive tiebreaker, because I think the Browns offense next year will be better than the Colts offense. Now we're going to have to see what Indianapolis does, because that reception tiebreaker you talked about could be as a result of check down Phillip, right? If Phillip Rivers is still the quarterback next year, then that is good news for Jonathan Taylor, his reception upside, because we know that Phillip Rivers throws to his running backs. But if they bring in another quarterback, maybe they bring in a Matthew Stafford or a Carson Wentz or something, that could change Jonathan Taylor's receiving volume, because we know what Phillip Rivers does to running backs. And that also, it just paints a little bit more of a cloudy picture in terms of the situation in general, which is why I favor someone like Nick Chubb over Jonathan Taylor. Hell, we compare Jonathan Taylor to Nick Chubb, so I'm going to keep Nick Chubb ahead of him until he proves that he's better than Nick Chubb. And if you on Chubb, if you remove the game that Chubb left with a knee injury this season, we saw a guy who averaged 18.65 PPR points per game in an offense that absolutely favors his style of running, and an offense that should improve from a scoring perspective, or at least get out to a hotter start this season, because I think the offense, the way that it's playing right now, is what we can expect next year. And that could even be a little bit better if Odell Beckham comes back, or who knows what they do with the receiving core. But that offensive line is elite. It's one of the best in the league. The running back himself, Nick Chubb, is elite. Baker Mayfield looks like he's taken a step forward in his career with a great coaching staff, great offensive line, and a scheme around him. This is a situation I don't have too many questions about. That's why I have Nick Chubb ahead of Jonathan Taylor. And if you pick Chubb in fantasy, to be honest, he probably won't be the RB1. He probably won't finish as the RB1 in fantasy, but I'm very comfortable projecting him as a fringe top 5 running back year in and year out.
Yeah, top 5 to 7. Yeah, I fully agree. Again, I currently have Chubb at my 8 right now, simply due to the receptions I expect with the guys I have over him, including the guy I'm going to mention next. But when you get
if you look at it this year, if you look at the first round of ADP, honestly, if you just hit a double up the middle, like for baseball terms, you would have had a great chance of winning your championship, because there's more chance that you're not going to make the playoffs or not going to make the championship in your fantasy league by missing in the first round than there is by then not hitting or whatever. Because Nick Chubb, for what it's worth, is not going to bust. Like, it's just not going to happen. Like, he's too good. He's too involved in the offense, and the offense is too tailored to his skill set for me to tell you that Nick Chubb is going to bust.
Yeah, and I fully agree. Again, like, if we're ranking like just running backs in the NFL, he would be way higher than 8 for me, because this guy is arguably a top 2 pure runner in the league. It's another guy I'll talk about. That's going to be Austin Ekeler, running back from the Los Angeles Chargers. So when we're talking about Austin Ekeler, I mean, if you play fantasy football and you ever had Austin Ekeler or played against Austin Ekeler, you already know kind of what he gives you from an output standpoint. I mean, this is a guy in his sample size playing with Justin Herbert this year had 64 targets in 9 games. Extrapolated across a 16-game sample size would equate to 114 targets, which would have actually led the position this year across the 16-game playing. So, I mean, this is a guy in Austin Ekeler who averaged 14.34 half PPR points per game with Justin Herbert, or the RB10 on a points per game basis. Now, you look at it from a football, from just a common sense standpoint. Okay, he was RB10 on points per game this year, despite playing with a rookie quarterback, dealing with injuries, and he was still giving you that elite production. Not to mention, I mean, this is a guy we should definitely absolutely expect potential positive touchdown regression. I mean, we see this guy, don't want to make that claim all the time, positive regression, but you're talking about a guy who only scored 3 total touchdowns this year and only had 1 goal line rushing touchdown on 18 total rushing goal line attempts. I mean, for a guy as talented and as good as Austin Ekeler, 1 out of 18 is simply just not going to happen on a year-to-year basis. So he can absolutely jump into that next tier of running backs, even if he meets that league average type threshold from the touchdown standpoint. So we absolutely love Austin Ekeler. If you guys are watching the channel for quite a while, we've always been on Team Ekeler. And again, if those touchdowns catch up, having him even as our consensus 8 may be low looking back on it.
Yeah, and I'm going to put this on the screen right now, because if you delve into the numbers deeper than most people are willing to do so, you can basically see that Austin Ekeler, his numbers, his raw numbers, are affected by a number of things. One, his receiving targets. He got 1 target in week 1, right? Tyrod Taylor was the quarterback. That was a big concern a lot of people had with Austin Ekeler coming into last year, was Tyrod Taylor not throwing to the running backs. So if you not remove that game, but if you take that into consideration, and then also if you take out the game he left in the first quarter against Tampa Bay, and then also the game in week 17 where they said before the game he'd be limited, and he had 42% of the snaps, which is about 20 to 30% below his normal allotment of snaps. If you remove those 2 games and then just take in consideration the other one, this is a guy giving you 20 PPR points per game. Why? Because he gets like 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 targets a game. That's just basically what happens. And we cited going into the season why we liked Austin Ekeler, and even if there was some kind of regression to his receiving efficiency, the reason we liked him was because he had virtually no rushing work when Melvin Gordon was there, right? He basically got 5, 6 carries a game. Well, he averaged 13.5 the games that he played the full game this year. So that is big time upgrade. It's like 7 extra carries a game is nothing to sneeze at. And especially for a guy of Austin Ekeler, yeah, exactly. For a guy of Austin Ekeler's talent level, and for an offense that only projects to probably get better, right? I know there's a little bit of a concern that the that the coach was fired, right? But this is a guy who has a quarterback who was a rookie last year and performed very, very well despite being a rookie. And there's a chance that Justin Herbert gets figured out, quote unquote, by opposing defenses. But I'm more believing in Justin Herbert's talent to provide a guy like Austin Ekeler with a top 15 type scoring offense. And a defense on the other side of the ball that is going to be better with Derwin James back and a number of other factors. Because for Austin Ekeler as a running back, positive game scripts and having the ball on offense because your defense is creating takeaways, all that kind of stuff factors in. And this is why we kind of preach the fact that defenses matter and taking players on good teams is very important because good teams lend itself to more fantasy points, more scoring opportunities, and all that kind of stuff. So Austin Ekeler, yeah, another guy like Nick Chubb that I'm very comfortable projecting as a top 6 to 8 running back and really not even thinking twice about it. Yeah, there's probably other guys that have higher ceilings, but even still, I still think these guys have high ceilings in their own right.
Yeah, and he's just so safe. I mean, receptions alone, 114 targets would be like without even like significant rushing work would guarantee him as a top 4.
And he gets Alvin Kamara level rushing work, right? 13 and a half carries, what I just said, is basically what Alvin Kamara gets. And it might even actually be a bit more than Alvin Kamara gets. Alvin Kamara gets like 12 to 13 carry or 12 to 15 carries a game. The reason he's so successful is because he gets so many receptions, which is why Drew Brees is so can actually impact his receiving output by so much. So Austin Ekeler, yeah, like I mentioned, it's absolutely no concerns with him. The offense should be better. The quarterback should be better. He should be better, not being as banged up as he was. Everything looks to be kind of projecting forward for Ekeler. And if Ekeler is available in the second round, which I imagine he's probably going to be in a lot of leagues, he's probably going to be a mid-second round pick or something like that. I'm going to take him every day of the week, to be honest, as my RB2. If I start the draft with like a Saquon Barkley and an Austin Ekeler, like, are you kidding me? Like,
Ekeler?
Yeah, or even like there's a chance he falls to the back of the second round. You start off with like Alvin Kamara and Ekeler.
The next guy I'm going to mention in Ezekiel Elliott is because of the receptions. I mean, don't get me wrong. Nick Chubb is a better running back than Ezekiel Elliott is. I'm not going to argue that. I'm not a biased Cowboys fan who's going to say Ezekiel Elliott is a more talented running back than Nick Chubb is, because that's simply not the case anymore. But let me make myself clear. Ezekiel Elliott is not to be disrespected going into the 2021 draft cycle. I mean, yes, I understand people are going to point at the RB14 half PPR points per game output he put up in 2020, but it would have been difficult really for anybody, any running back, to live up to the expectations when you're missing your top 2 offensive tackles, all pro caliber tackles in Tyron Smith and Lyle Collins, who played a combined 2 games this year, who, guess what? The replacements were undrafted free agents. Every single person on that offensive line missed multiple games. And the main caveat, Dak Prescott going down after 5 games. Well, if it just so happens that if you took that 5-game sample size with even just Dak Prescott, not even talking about the tackles, not even talking about the other offensive linemen, just Dak Prescott, this is a guy in Ezekiel Elliott who averaged 6.4 targets per game, 107.4 yards from scrimmage per game, and had 6 touchdowns in 5 games. If you equate that to half PPR points per game, that would equal 19.94, which would only trail Kamara, Cook, and Henry for the RB position. So, I mean, this is a guy, again, he's proven time and time again when the situation is not totally imploded from under him. He averaged 20.6, 19, 19.4, and 17.8 half PPR points respectively from 2016 to 2019, and showed that he was on that type of trajectory for the first 5 games with Dak Prescott this year. Now, obviously, if Dak Prescott leaves this offseason, he's not going to be my RB7. But under the assumption that Dak is back, Cowboys aren't stupid and they re-sign their franchise quarterback, this is a guy who's going to go in the late first, early second of fantasy drafts because people are going to put on the, oh, this is a declining running back, I don't want him type of narrative on him. And he's going to return value because let's be honest here. When Ezekiel Elliott is healthy and the situation is healthy around him, he's a top 5 to 6 running back. Now, you're getting a little bit of a discount, obviously, because of this finish this year, but take that value there 100%.
Yeah, and there's not much I can disagree with about Ezekiel Elliott. Like, when you're getting into this part of the draft, and I mentioned tiers, right? This is how you should always be drafting because certain people you're going to like over the others. I think certain guys are interchangeable. Some guy might have a little bit more receiving upside here, like Jonathan Taylor over Nick Chubb. One guy might have a little bit more talent or a better offense here and there. And it's all about weighing what you think is more important, and that's how you kind of rank these guys. Ezekiel Elliott is the least talented of those running backs, I would say, between Nick Chubb and Jonathan Taylor and those guys. But his situation is better than both of theirs, right? Because he has probably the same amount, if not more, receiving upside if his past career has been any indication. And his offense is better than both of theirs, right? So the scoring opportunities and all that kind of stuff is definitely favoring Ezekiel Elliott. And I have no qualms with anyone picking him probably as high as like 5 or 6 in fantasy drafts. I probably wouldn't pick him any higher than that, but that is about the range that I expect him to go. I don't think people are going to be really stupid, to be honest. I don't think anyone's going to let him fall to like the mid-second round or anything like that. I think he's going to go off the board in the first round, probably before pick 10, if I had to guess. So he's currently my RB10 right now, and it's all kind of hinging on his talent right now and the The guys ahead of him, they have concerns. And if their concerns aren't addressed the way I think they're going to be addressed, then they're going to move below Ezekiel Elliott. And I'll talk about that in a bit. All right, so I mentioned the tier gap before, right? I said there was a tier gap from Derrick Henry to Saquon Barkley. Well, this is the end of this tier. So Saquon Barkley at 5, Jonathan Taylor at 6, Nick Chubb at 7, Austin Ekeler at 8, Ezekiel Elliott at 9. Aaron Jones is the last guy that I designated in this tier of running backs because these are the sure things. These top 10 guys are the sure things, and this is assuming Aaron Jones is back in Green Bay, right? Let me just make that clear. If Aaron Jones is back in Green Bay next year on a franchise tag, or maybe they work out a long-term contract, he is a big-time collection of all the factors you want in a fantasy running back. He's an elite talent. He has breakaway speed. He gets valuable receiving work, not just checkdowns and all that kind of stuff, downfield and red zone work. He elite offense. This is an elite offense with an elite quarterback playing elite football. The only thing holding Aaron Jones back from being higher than he is now is the fact that he doesn't get the volume that Christian McCaffrey gets, and he doesn't get the volume that Alvin Kamara gets even. So that is really the only thing holding him back. Another thing that is helpful for Aaron Jones, because we all as fantasy players, we're greedy, right? We want him to get 20 carries a game and 10 targets a game. But the problem with that is he might not stay healthy. And guess what? Matt LaFleur has been able to keep him healthy with the workload that he's given him. So maybe he knows something that we don't. Maybe Aaron Jones can't handle a workload that we want for him. So this is a guy that I feel very comfortable, again, projecting as a top 6 to 8 running back because he thrives off of efficiency, and that is very sustainable to him because he is used very well and he's in a very good offense to do so. Like a stat I talked to you about before we started recording, he had more red zone targets last year than Mark Andrews. He had more red zone targets last year than Mike frickin' Evans, and Mike Evans had 13 touchdowns. This is a running back we're talking about. Like, it is completely asinine how much he's used in the receiving game and how valuable his usage actually is. If there was like a metric that someone created where they determined the value of someone's touches based on the area of the field that they got them and the type of downfield ADOT and all that kind of stuff, I bet Aaron Jones ranks at the top of the NFL.
Yeah, no, fully. And you're talking about a guy, Aaron Jones, who was excluding, again, those factors, Antonio Williams and McCaffrey, who played 4 combined games. Aaron Jones was the RB4 in half PPR points per game. And he's gotten like that boom bust type label, which I get it. There's some weeks where he can absolutely blow up, and some games where he doesn't really live up to that top 5 type billing. But at the end of the day, this is a guy who finished as the RB5, RB4 in points per game, and you're getting him as your RB total 10. Like, you can afford the volatile play at that point, given that any type of week he can win you. Any week in that league, any given week, he can win you a week because he's got 45 point potential given the amount of talent, the amount of efficiency that he provides. So I absolutely agree. Again, he is currently I believe he's also my 10. No,
he's my 9. He's your 10, I think.
He's my 10. He's your 9. So I fully agree. Again, Aaron Jones is absolutely the last person of this tier. Again, we mentioned to recap, if you guys have made it this far in the video. So our top 4 tier would be the CMC, Dalvin, Kamara, Henry. Then there's a tier gap: Saquon, Jonathan Taylor, Nick Chubb, Austin Ekeler, Ezekiel Elliott, Aaron Jones. Tier gap. And then we're going to be talking about
a lot of guys after that.
You can bring up who's our consensus 11, and he's actually a guy we both like, a talented guy who's going to be going into his second year. Actually, the second RB of the 2020 draft class we're going to be talking about, and that's going to be none other than Cam Akers, running back from the Los Angeles Rams. So take it away.
Yeah, so before I get into Cam Akers, let me just be clear. There's like 7 running backs that someone could reasonably have as their RB11, and I probably wouldn't be too concerned about it. When we're talking about Cam Akers, J.K. Dobbins, Antonio Gibson, Josh Jacobs, James Robinson, DeAndre Swift, Miles Sanders, all these guys have a case to be right in this next tier. And I think they all kind of are as it stands right now as we project what their situations are going forward. But Cam Akers is at the top of that list for me. And the reason is because Cam Akers, if you look at his workload and the way it evolved over the season, he had over 65% of the snaps and at least 22 touches in every game except for the Jets game where he left early with, I believe it was like a knee injury or something like that. After week 12. So basically the light switch turned on for Cam Akers the way it did for Jonathan Taylor. And he broke out against San Francisco. He had 9 carries for 84 yards against San Francisco. And the very next week, Sean McVay was like, we got to get this guy the ball more. And the next week he had like 25 touches. And that didn't stop. And it really the biggest thing for running backs workloads is coaching, right? It all comes down to coaching. Coaches decide who's on the field, who's getting the most volume. They call the plays. They decide when the run is happening, all that kind of stuff. And this is a coaching staff that we saw absolutely feed Todd Gurley in his prime. He is a feature workhorse role that they are very comfortable giving to a running back who's earned it. And they trust Cam Akers now. They just trusted the kid with 30 touches in a playoff game against their biggest rival, a playoff game where he played very well, and a playoff game that they won because of him playing very well. So at that point, it really just comes down to talent for Akers. If Akers is a talented running back, if he plays well, he shows out in camp, he continues to impress, we can expect Sean McVay to reward him with the volume that he deserves. We could be talking about a running back that wins people championships in 2021. Think of Miles Sanders' arguments last year, except we have a better offense and a coaching staff that likes feature backs. That kind of, it's a committee type situation shouldn't linger in fantasy players' minds anymore with Cam Akers, because we've now seen Sean McVay put his money where his mouth is and give Cam Akers the ball. And I'm willing to bet, we have a playoff game coming up this weekend where the Rams are playing the Packers. I'm willing to bet Cam Akers gets another 20 touches in that game.
Yeah, no, I fully agree. Again, I mean, this guy has every bit showed and oozed the talent that the Rams really thought he had and put faith into him having with that second-round selection. I mean, we saw earlier this season, Henderson got his work. But once Akers came in and took that workhorse role, I mean, he's been getting the touches. He's been efficient with the touches. I mean, we've seen this guy absolutely explode down the stretch. And again, I fully agree. I mean, out of these second-year running backs, apart from Jonathan Taylor, he is the one I want because he is the one I feel most secure with his workload heading into next year and most secure with the offense if you want to balance that with the workload. Because, again, you talk about a guy like J.K. Dobbins, I'm going to mention him. Yes, he's in the best offense of the group, but we don't know what his workload is going to be.
I mean, Clyde's
we don't know what his workload is going to be either. Which
exactly, that's our point basically. And all of these guys have questions. We personally just think that Cam Akers has the least amount of questions compared to someone like Miles Sanders, who I have all the way down at 17. I think he has more questions than a guy like Cam Akers, even though it wouldn't really shock me if someone said they'd take Miles Sanders over Cam Akers next year.
That's what makes this a huge tier. I mean, 11 to 17. I could very well see anybody making the
argument. You can even throw a couple more guys in this tier too. You could throw David Montgomery in this tier potentially. You could throw Joe Mixon in this tier potentially. You could even throw Clyde in this tier potentially. Like it really comes down to preference, risk tolerance, what you value more in running backs, whether it's offense, talent, receiving work, all that kind of stuff. They all have different pluses and minuses to their games. And it's going to be our jobs, obviously, to sort through that throughout the offseason and determine which matters more. Personally, I think Cam Akers has the least amount of questions, so he's my RB11, and he's our consensus RB11.
For sure. Again, this is clear as day. I mean, you can go with any one of these guys, but at the end of the day here, throughout the offseason, we're not going to get everything right, but we're going to do our best at getting all the research ready for you guys and making those key informed decisions. That ultimately
these are the decisions that matter, because these are the guys you're picking in the second round or third round, and these are guys that can potentially win you championships. Because if you get Cam Akers at the 305 this year or something like that, and he's your third running back or your second running back, and you already have a Devontae Adams and Austin Ekeler on your team, Cam Akers has the ceiling with that kind of risk mitigation, the fact that he's your third pick. He has the ceiling to win you a championship.
Yep, I fully agree. The final guy we're going to mention, and yet another rookie running back, people are going to wonder, what about, is it Antonio Gibson? Is it DeAndre Swift? Maybe James Robinson? No, I'm going to be talking about J.K. Dobbins, the running back from the Baltimore Ravens. I mean, the argument for him is really quite simple. Mark Ingram is a free agent, opening up even more opportunities for one of the most efficient running backs in the entire NFL on one of the most efficient rushing offenses in the entire NFL. I mean, this is a guy who turned 152 total touches in his 15 games, around roughly 10 per game, into 9 rushing touchdowns and 925 yards from scrimmage. Just baffling when you think about it. I mean, he averaged over 6 yards per touch. He's efficient. Plays on a team that, quite frankly, is always running the ball efficiently. I mean, this is a guy who doesn't need that typical 250 type touch range that we would expect from guys who are going to finish in the RB1. No. This guy can get 200 or so touches and still gives you top 10 type RB potential. So I absolutely love it. You're looking at him. He's going into his second year in the system, really getting acclimated, really earning his touches, really earning the respect and role from John Harbaugh. Not to mention, I mean, we're talking about Mark Ingram's vacated 78 touches if he's not brought back. The ceiling of J.K. Dobbins, if he gets an ample enough workload, is literally a top 3, top 4 type running back. Again, the question marks here is what is really his workload potential in this offense that still has Gus Edwards, that still has Lamar Jackson running the ball? That's the question, and that's why he kind of lands in this tier 3 RB11 type area for me and our consensus RB12.
Yeah, I have questions about J.K. Dobbins, and mainly it has nothing to do with J.K. Dobbins. He is probably, on a per-touch basis, was the most talented rookie running back this season. He looked incredible on every time he touched the ball. And honestly, I was just, as a J.K. Dobbins owner, I was yelling at John Harbaugh at my TV all the time for not giving this guy the ball all the time, because he clearly made the offense better when he was on the field. My problem with this offense is John Harbaugh has consistently used a running back by committee. He's consistently used Gus Edwards on the goal line, and he's shown comfort in doing so, and rightfully so. Gus Edwards is a good running back. He's not a bad running back. It's not like John Harbaugh's trotting some slappy out there over J.K. Dobbins. Gus Edwards is efficient in his own right. So that alone makes him below some of these guys, and it's actually the reason that I have J.K. Dobbins at 14 and not at 12 where he sits in our consensus. So again, this is all splitting hairs. It really comes down to who do you feel most comfortable with? What is the risk like? What is the draft? Like, again, this is also probably going to come down to where they're being drafted as well, because I have a feeling a guy like J.K. Dobbins is going to go a little bit too high for my liking in fantasy drafts this year. And he's probably going to be a guy that I favor a number of other guys over for that reason.
Yeah, no, I fully understand that. Again, if you're in the second round, and a lot of times you're just going to feel comfortable and safe with the guy, like, for example, an honorable mention of ours, Josh Jacobs, who you know is going to get the workload, you know is probably going to be in that RB 9 to 12 type area, whereas he doesn't have the ceiling of a Dobbins, which is why I personally have Dobbins ahead of him. But you might feel more comfortable with him being your RB2 after you get a stud like, say, Austin Ekeler, Ezekiel Elliott, Saquon Barkley, and you turn around, you want to get that guy who can support them. But none of these guys, in my opinion, in this tier, in this third tier, present the type of potential that J.K. Dobbins does, which is why I have him at 11 ahead of a couple of these guys. But yeah, fully, I could see anybody making real arguments for any of these guys, even up to 17, 18, even 19. Again, we mentioned Montgomery and Mixon aren't even listed in these honorable mentions. Up to 19.
Even guys like, again, probably not to this extent, but guys like Ronald Jones and Clyde Edwards-Helaire and stuff like that, those guys are going to probably have a fit in the RB2 type range as well. There's a lot of, not depth at running back, but there's a lot of serviceable fantasy players this season. And we can just briefly talk about the last couple guys here. Antonio Gibson, we expect the offense to get better, which is why I have him at 12. Actually, he's actually would be in my top 12. I expect the offense to get a lot better with potentially a new quarterback or a new kind of familiarity with the system. Even if Alex Smith is the quarterback next year, honestly, like I still don't see a reason why Antonio Gibson shouldn't be a top 12 running back, even if Alex Smith is the quarterback and the offense stays exactly the same. And then again, you add in on top of the fact that they're probably going to make some additions, whether it be more receiving talent, another quarterback, potentially, all that kind of stuff plays into a factor for Antonio Gibson. And then you mentioned Josh Jacobs. He's a guy, I have no questions about his workload. He showed his ability to increase his receiving workload this season, which is something that a lot of people doubted about him, that I personally did not, which is good news for Josh Jacobs. And then the question really is about the offense and his usage, because it hadn't been consistent sometimes in game scripts, and they kind of just got away from it against tougher opponents. So that's a schedule type of thing is a big deal for Josh Jacobs, because for whatever reason, John Gruden tended to abandon the run in tough matchups. And then James Robinson, we kind of, I don't want to say we're down on James Robinson, but we expect them to add somebody, right? A veteran, another rookie, all that kind of stuff contributes. And on top of that, Doug Marrone got fired, right? And Doug Marrone has shown now that he doesn't care whether a running back is efficient or not. He's going to give someone a feature workload. He didn't give a shit that Leonard Fournette was averaging like 3.2 yards per carry or whatever he was averaging. He didn't really care that James Robinson was an undrafted free agent. And potentially, James Robinson was good. He wasn't like a world breaker. He wasn't the best rookie running back in the league or anything. So I think Doug Marrone is a bigger part of why James Robinson was so fantasy relevant that people care to admit. And I think that changes this year, which is why I'm a little bit lower on a guy like James Robinson. And honestly, 15, where I have James Robinson, is only really out of respect for what he did this year. Because I imagine I'm probably going to have him lower than that next year if the situation remains kind of similar to what it is now.
Yep, I'm on the same boat as you with James Robinson. Not to mention, again, new coaching staff. Yes, he got the receiving work this year, but you're drafting Trevor Lawrence.
We saw Philip Lindsay when he got a new coaching staff after his undrafted year where he rushed for 1,000 yards, much like James Robinson did this year.
Jordan Howard as well.
They were able to, not Jordan Howard, they used Royce Freeman more in the second season, right? The new coaching staff. And after that, they brought in Melvin Gordon. And they just, for whatever reason, they didn't seem to trust Philip Lindsay. And that's, again, that might have been different if Vance Joseph had stayed the coach in Denver, and they might have just kept going with Philip Lindsay, and we might be talking about Philip Lindsay in a completely different light right now. But I just, the fact that the coaching staff is going to change for a guy who doesn't have the draft capital and the reason to give him the ball, a huge contract or anything like that, it's just a little concerning with James Robinson. An undrafted free agent tag is definitely indicative of success in the NFL. You don't see undrafted free agents come along very often and just become these superstar running backs.
Yeah, no, I agree. Again, the reason why I mentioned Jordan Howard is it was kind of a similar situation, like a lower drafted type guy. Actually, Jordan Howard might have been a third rounder, to be quite honest.
He was a sixth
similar
rounder.
Success. He's a sixth rounder, Jordan Howard?
Yeah, he went in the sixth round of the draft.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, it was Kevin Coleman that went in the third round. But anyways, yeah, I mean, you're talking about he had a successful rookie season, and kind of similar to James Robinson. Again, a lot of it was due to the workload. Once that kind of cut down a little bit, again, the second season he didn't really receive that type of receiving volume as well, because they realized
the second season they had Tariq Cohen, and Tariq Cohen took away the receiving volume and some of the rushing volume as well. And then by 2018, Jordan Howard was just a touchdown or bust guy.
Yep, for sure. So again, respect James Robinson. That's why he's even here. But to be honest, I wouldn't be shocked by the end of the cycle we're having guys like Miles Sanders, David Montgomery, even maybe Joe Mixon ahead of them. So I fully agree with you there.
Yep. That's it, guys. If you guys made it to this point in the video, it's about 51 minutes long that we got to it. Make sure you guys leave a like if you enjoyed. Comment any of your thoughts down below, maybe where you disagree, maybe what your own running back rankings are. We always love hearing your thoughts down there. As I mentioned, if you have any ideas for videos that we're going to be doing that we can do for you guys leading up to the NFL draft and all that kind of stuff, we have some stuff planned coming up. But we're definitely looking to interact with you guys, and we'll definitely do some more listener engagement type of stuff, Q&As in the Discord, all that kind of stuff that you guys will probably enjoy. So make sure you guys are leaving comments like that. Subscribe to the channel if you enjoyed this. If you're new, this is the first video of ours you're seeing. We encourage you to stick around. We got some big things coming. Yeah, that's about it, guys. Hope you guys enjoyed. Enjoy your Wednesday.
Yep, for sure. Peace out, y'all.